The morning I found the paperwork, the coffee tasted like a lie. Not burnt, not bitter, just fundamentally, irrevocably fraudulent. It was a crisp, official-looking document, tucked inside a gym bag my fiancée, Sarah, had accidentally left on the kitchen counter. It wasn't a receipt or a utility bill. It was a private bank statement for an account I had never heard of, listing a balance that made my stomach drop. $185,000. We had the quintessential modern-day romance. Met during a delayed flight, bonded over shared sarcasm. And now, 3 years later, we were 2 months out from a destination wedding in Santorini. Our life together was a comfortable duet. We lived in a beautiful, jointly owned condo in downtown Toronto, drove his and hers German cars, and had a golden retriever named Archimedes, who was probably the only truly honest member of our household. Financially, we were open book, or so I thought. We had a joint checking account for bills and a shared savings account for the wedding and our eventual dream house. Sarah also had her own accounts, of course, which I never questioned. That's normal. We respected boundaries. She handled her firm's corporate accounts, which was complex, high-pressure work that often had her traveling. "It's just business, Alex," she'd say, rolling her eyes and kissing me goodbye before catching a flight to New York or London. "You know how these corporate structures are, lots of moving parts." And I bought it. Hook, line, and a very expensive titanium wedding band. After all, why wouldn't I? We were building a life, not a corporate merger. The trouble actually started subtly, a persistent, low-frequency hum of something being off. It began with the prenup. I'd proposed a simple, boilerplate agreement, mostly to protect the condo, which had been a gift from my parents. Sarah had immediately hired a ferocious-sounding lawyer from out of town, a man named Mr. Thorne, who specialized in complex asset division. "It's just business, darling," she'd explained, a little too quickly, over a takeout dinner. "My firm advised me, you know I have intellectual property and stock options. We need to protect both of us." I, the analyst, found her logic illogical. Her assets were relatively straightforward, but I conceded. Love, I told myself, required a generous margin for error and a willingness to compromise on legal fees. Then came that Tuesday morning. The 100. First step, verification. The bank was one I didn't recognize, a smaller regional institution based 4 hours away. The statement was recent, dated just 2 weeks prior. The account type was listed as a corporate services holding account. When Sarah came back, she saw the paper in my hand. The casual, sunny expression she usually wore evaporated, replaced by a mask of cold, controlled calculation. "Alex, put that down," she said, her voice dangerously even. "I can't," I replied, my own voice unnervingly calm, like the eye of a hurricane. "What is this, Sarah? A corporate services holding account? What corporation? You work for someone else. You don't own a corporation." She took a breath, preparing her defense. "It's exactly what I told you. It's just business. A special project I've been running for the firm. A big client, very sensitive, lots of shell corporations involved for tax purposes. The firm asked me to use a private account for a few months for liquidity." I looked at the 6-figure balance. Liquidity? Sarah, $185,000 isn't liquidity. That's a down payment. And why is this account in your name, with you listed as the sole director? She launched into a furious tirade, accusing me of spying, of lacking trust, of trying to sabotage her career. But all the emotion was tactical. It was designed to make me feel guilty for asking questions, to distract me from the data points. It didn't work. The analyst in me had already flagged the anomaly. The fiancé in me felt a sick, creeping dread. The next 72 hours were a blur of work and covert investigation. I didn't confront her again. I pretended to accept her explanation, mumbled an apology about my anxiety, and watched as the tension between us became a thick, palpable thing. But every night after she fell asleep, I was at my desktop. I couldn't access her private accounts, but I didn't need to. I'm a systems analyst. I know how information bleeds. I started with the condo lease. We had recently renewed it, and I remembered signing a mountain of digital paperwork, tucked away in a seldom-used folder on our shared cloud drive. I found the master lease agreement with the landlord's management company. Sarah had handled the digital submission. I noticed something instantly. The required proof of funds document, which she had uploaded to secure the renewal, wasn't our joint savings account. It was a completely different one. And the name on the account wasn't a corporate client's. It was S. Montgomery Services, LLC. I traced the LLC. A quick, late-night search on the government's corporate registry revealed Sarah was the sole registered agent. The date of incorporation? 8 months ago, 1 month before the bank account was opened, and 2 months before she officially accepted my proposal. The knot in my stomach tightened into a painful twist. This wasn't corporate tax maneuvering. This was premeditation. I called my oldest friend, Mark, an attorney who specialized in contract law, and told him everything but the proposal detail. I kept that, for some reason, close to my chest. Mark's initial reaction was classic lawyer dry. "Alex, you have a problem. Not a relationship problem. A potential fraudulent conveyance problem. This looks like systematic separation of assets." He connected me with a specialized family law firm that understood complex financial structures. Their advice was chilling. "We need to be faster than Mr. Thorne. Do not show your hand. Move your liquid assets into a separate, shielded account. Get a forensic accountant now." I followed their advice to the letter. I became two people, the oblivious, loving fiancé planning a seating chart, and the cold, strategic analyst building a legal case. The dry humor kicked in then. I found myself sarcastically commenting to Archimedes, "Well, boy, it looks like your mother is a criminal mastermind, and I'm just here for the plot twist." 2 weeks later, the forensic accountant delivered the first report. The findings were concise, brutal, and utterly devastating. Montgomery Services LLC was not a client-facing corporate tool. It was a shell company designed to slowly siphon funds. Sarah had been manipulating the expense reports from her legitimate job, small, untraceable amounts, and funneling them into the LLC account, declaring them as legitimate subcontractor fees. That $185,000 wasn't her firm's money. It was stolen, meticulously laundered through the LLC, and then treated as her own capital. But the worst was the date, the pre-engagement date. My attorney, Ms. Chen, a woman with the calm demeanor of a seasoned poker player, called me in. "Alex, this is beyond a breach of trust. This is financial malice. The timeline suggests she started setting up her financial independence before she finalized the commitment to you. The wedding planning, the engagement, it was a timeline for asset maximization before a planned exit. She was setting me up for a better divorce settlement. I finished for her." The thought wasn't emotional anymore. It was an accepted fact, a solved equation. She wasn't preparing for our future. She was preparing for my ruin. I knew I couldn't wait for the court. I needed to see her face when the carefully constructed edifice of her lies finally collapsed. That evening, I set the scene. A bottle of our favorite champagne, a celebratory dinner for something I pretended had happened at work. I acted the part perfectly. I even pulled her into a loving hug. Then, just as she was mid-sentence, talking about the canapés for the wedding, I reached into my jacket and slid the forensic report across the table. "Happy anniversary, Sarah. I'm canceling Santorini and the wedding." The color drained from her face. She picked up the report, her eyes scanning the cover page. Montgomery Services LLC, unauthorized asset funneling. Her first reaction wasn't tears or denial. It was icy fury. "You went through my things? You hired a private investigator? You absolute psychopath." "No," I said, picking up the separate bank statement I'd found weeks ago. I opened a gym bag. "I'm a systems analyst, Sarah. I don't need an investigator. I just needed a single, verifiable data point. You were sloppy." "It's just business, Alex," she screamed, slamming the papers onto the table. "You have no idea how competitive my world is. I was protecting us. I was building a safety net. A safety net with money stolen from your company, laundered through a shell LLC you set up before we were engaged." I stood up, my voice still quiet, but cutting. "That's not a safety net. That's premeditated financial ambush. You weren't protecting us. You were protecting you from me." She tried one last maneuver, the classic distraction. "If you do this, you lose the condo, you lose your half. Mr. Thorne will bury you." I smiled, a genuinely dry, sarcastic smile. "Mr. Thorne can try, but he's going to have a hard time defending a case where his client is being investigated for corporate fraud and theft. I've already submitted the evidence to your firm's internal security and the regulatory body. They have your $185,000 account number. It's no longer just business, Sarah. It's a felony." The look on her face, the sudden, terrifying realization that her calculated risk had become a career-ending catastrophe, was my final, painful, and necessary closure. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Chaotic, but contained. The wedding was called off. The condo sale was immediately put on hold. Sarah's defense crumbled. Ms. Chen, my attorney, was a marvel of strategic patience. Because I had filed the financial fraud evidence with the relevant authorities before Sarah could file her legal separation papers, the entire case shifted. The focus wasn't on dividing our marital assets, it was on restoring fraudulently obtained assets and dealing with her company's internal investigation. She was forced to settle quickly and severely. She walked away with almost nothing beyond personal effects, her reputation in her industry destroyed. The stress of the situation nearly broke me. But I found an unexpected anchor in my logical approach. I treated the crisis like a massive, multifaceted system failure, and I dedicated myself to fixing the system. Mark, my friend, summed it up perfectly. You know, Alex, the difference between you two is that you believed in the marriage contract, and she only believed in the legal one. You won because you understood the details, and she only understood the manipulation. I sold the condo, paid off the mortgage, and moved into a smaller, rental apartment. It was a reset, a clean slate. I kept Archimedes, and he, unaware of the trauma, just kept bringing me the same squeaky toy. The lesson I learned wasn't about love, not really. It was about trust versus verification. Love is an emotional state. Partnership is a system of agreed-upon, verifiable facts. When one partner introduces an element of fraud, the whole system collapses. Now, 6 months later, I'm still single, still a systems analyst, and still very much me. I'm rebuilding my life, not with the naive optimism of a newly engaged man, but with the measured confidence of someone who has stared down a calculated betrayal and won the long game by focusing on the data, not the drama. The biggest lesson? When someone says something is just business, you better check the books, because in the end, it always is. And the business they're doing might be the dissolution of your future. I'm not bitter. I'm calibrated. And I'm ready for the next system upgrade, whenever that may be.